To the cloud, hopefully. Here we go. All right. We are doing automated transcription and it can be downloadable. So, anyway, we're welcoming tonight Tim Biskup. Tim Biscuit is the CMO and principal consultant at Growth Spectrum, where he helps leaders and teams diagnose organizational drift and build systems that scale with clarity and psychological safety. His work blends leadership development, quadrant-based organizational design, and practical behavior frameworks like the Lominger competencies, with a background spanning creative direction, database marketing, operations, and strategic architecture. He brings a uniquely integrated perspective to agility, one that unifies people, process, vision, and execution into a coherent system. He's known for making complex concepts accessible, actionable, and professionally human. And the topic he's going to talk to us tonight is about when Agile breaks, the misalignments no framework can fix. So he's going to help us explore organization and agility, how it merges from a deeper systemic alignment across four quadrants of vision, structure, culture, and execution. And he's going to be drawing from leadership development, Lominger competency patterns, and growth spectrum, his company's diagnostic work. And we really look forward to the rest of the conversation. So I'm going to be quiet now and let Tim take over.
All right. Well, thanks, Ken.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
He is also an awesome person, by the way. I used to work for Tim, so he was one of the best
Yeah.
bosses ever, I can tell you.
Well, thank you. That worked.
Yep.
That's really good. All right. So just to kind of lay the groundwork right in the beginning here, I am not an agile coach. I'm not a scrum master, right? I have been the PMO at a number of marketing agencies. And so part of what I do is I help project managers to be successful in environments that are far less structured and far less rules based, right? So I'll, you're not going to get like how to set up your scrums better, all that, because at the end of the day, it's you can still have everybody following the framework. You can have all the ceremonies and things can still stall, right? And it's not due to anything that's going wrong within the way that you're executing the recipe of Agile. Now to start, I'm going to do an icebreaker. And we're going to start with what I call the Bob and Susie scenario. And I've done this with a number of teams, and every team has very different answers. But it does tend to be that like-minded people tend to actually respond the same. So when everybody responds and it all comes out to be the same answer, don't think that that means it's always the same answer. It just means that you guys are much more in sync um, with yourselves than with other people out there. So what I've got here is that you're running a business. Something outside of everybody's control has cut revenue by 50%. So you had Bob and you had Susie, and they're both working the same job. And here's like the basic differences between the two of them. I'll let you guys read them. I mean, raise your hand or write in the chat if you're not able to read the content. Oh, Mari, you can't read it? Okay. Then let me just quick go through it. So I'll just quick read through. So Bob, he's 45 years old. He's single. He's getting paid $75,000 a year. He's been there for 20 years and he never misses a deadline. He's loyal, he's flexible, he's consistent. He's well liked by clients and colleagues because they appreciate his direct approach. He gets job offers from other companies regularly, so you're constantly having to compete to keep his salary at a good level for you. And not that this is relevant, but he has hobbies, friends, and an active life outside of work. Now, Susie, on the other hand, she is 30, single mother of three, and she's being paid $55,000 a year. She's been there for 5 years. She does occasionally miss deadlines due to life demands, but she works hard to stay consistent and she makes good on those deadlines missed. Her clients love her and they appreciate that she listens to them and understands them. She's always eager to learn new systems, and she does not have an external support system. She's very focused on motherhood, and that consumes a lot of her time. So those are the two people that you have to pick between. You only get to keep one. And since the group is small enough, what I'd like to do then is actually kind of go person by person and have you say who you'd keep and a brief explanation of the primary reason behind that decision. So Ken, since I feel safe with you.
Dang, make me go there first, right?
Yep.
Um, I'm trying to figure out if this is a false decision or not. I have a little bit of a different approach. I may actually pull them into a conversation and ask them
Well then, okay,
their
we can
preference.
skip because I think I know where you're
Yeah.
going, and there's no trick here, right?
Okay. Yep.
And actually, all the little bullets here, right? Like they're two good options. So I'm gonna say
Okay.
in my mind, I believe that they're both worthy of keeping, right?
Yep.
I don't see either one as better, but if you're making a decision, you have to pick between one of the two of them, and what's the reason?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I
Oh,
could see
actually,
what my,
so Maggie's responded. Maggie, are you able to speak, or are is it what you have in the chat? Can I just read that?
You can read it.
Okay. Or do you want to speak it? Because I'd rather just talk.
Sure. I mean, I'm just, you know, my biases may be showing here, so caveat. But but basically, when I look at who someone needs to go, right? So if
Mhm.
I'm thinking from two sides, right? I'm thinking from a humane, like a kindness side to people, and I'm also thinking from the business side, right? But from purely from the business side, starting off, the fact that clients love someone in my employ is so invaluable. Like I can't even. That's like a huge shining star for me. A and B. What the hell is a missed deadline? Like she didn't send me an email reply when I thought, like, isn't a deadline like what is, you know what I mean? Like no missed deadline that matters in my mind is the responsibility of any one person. So I don't really get that. And then the second part is that it seems like Bob maybe it doesn't say that if he's a father or a caregiver or anything like that. So I have to assume he's not, and that he might be more able to just land another job more easily and be more flexible. Whereas a mother of three, single mother of three, may not. That was it.
Excellent, Maggie. I'm glad you have it written down because when we get to the next slide, there's like three or four different things we can cover on there, which is perfect. So I would say that's the best answer I've ever gotten.
Oh,
All right. So, anybody else want to volunteer to go next, or I'm just going to start picking names?
Uh, I'll be glad to go.
Sure.
Um, I have to ask one question first.
Sure.
This organization that has to lay off the worker, does it keep people around? Does it do personal development? So Bob's been there 20 years, but is that a usual thing or is that an outlier?
So for the sake of this, let's just say it's a really small company and there's maybe some people in the factory, but other than that, like Bob and Susie are up in the front office. So it's not a large organization with like a big
Uh,
learning
well,
track, right? Does that help, Press?
I can't tell you how many times I've been Bob.
Okay.
So, but I know you have to keep Susie for exactly the reason that Maggie just said.
Yep.
Clients love her. And there's another thing which is extremely important, always eager to learn new systems. That's not to say Bob can't, but Bob at age 45, this will be his last chance to find another job in the kind of like normal job and placement where we look. And I would hope that the company would reward the 20 years with a decent layoff package.
Well, and that would be within your control, right? But yeah, absolutely. I agree. Excellent answer. All right, you guys are actually kicking it. So this is a good group. All right. So who's next?
I volunteer.
Okay.
Yes. So first of all, I also look for our company's culture, right? So as Maggie mentioned, Parrots is about like customers, also clients loving Susie. Now, my next question also would be, how much would be like the investment of training Susie, in case like Bob lives and keep her having growing within the company. That's something too that I would look at, right? So I mean, I see like Bob is making 75,000 a year versus 55,000, but also I think like investing on Susie's growth would actually be great and good for your company as well.
So let me just make sure I can break down. Are you looking for me to say how much it would cost to get Susie up to Bob's level? of knowledge?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that would be my
So
question.
let's
So
just for the sake of the argument, we'll just say that Susie pretty much knows everything Bob does. So even though he's been there 20 years, kind of to Pretz's question, it's not like you've actually gained some sort of like institutional knowledge that makes him superior to her. Is that does that help?
exactly, yes, of course. So then in that case, I'm keeping like Susie instead of if I have to decide, I keep Susie as well.
Okay. All right. Next.
Does anybody want to raise their hand if they want to go next?
Tim, you're going to have to encourage people to speak
Yeah,
up.
that's fine.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll go to, I guess, is that Arseny?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I was late. I was missed the part,
Oh, no worries.
but
Do you have the details of what we're doing here?
not exactly.
Oh, sure. So we have a company where revenue's gone down 50%. And we have Bob and Susie are the two people that are in this one role. Let's say that it's client service or whatever, right? So you got
Okay.
a factory, you got two people that kind of manage all your client relationships. Something's happened in the industry. There's no way you can recover the revenue. You're gonna have to run it half. You can't afford to keep both on, so you have to let one go. Are you able to read the contents of the slide, or do I need to?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I can
Yep. So then you just have to pick between who you would keep, either Bob or Susie.
keep in the company.
Yeah, and then why?
Oh, hate those questions. It's very, uh,
And just so you know, it's not a trick question. There's no like, oh, well, you should have thought of that. It's literally just to get people to say what drives their decision and which way they'd go.
okay, I just guess. I'm not sure if I make a right decision, but I would keep Bob
Okay. Now,
because
what
of
would?
his experience.
Okay.
Yeah, 20
All
years
right.
experience. That's it. Sorry.
Excellent. Nope, no problem.
No, no much explanation.
That's more than an acceptable answer. All right.
Yeah. Looks like
And then
Fernando has
Yvonne,
his
you
hand
already
raised.
went. What's that?
Looks like Fernando has his hand
Oh,
raised.
Fernando. Okay, go ahead, Fernando.
Oh yeah, I was hoping to hear someone wanted to keep Bob, but I will also keep Susie. And the reason it seems that on the first place, Bob seems to be able to find a job quickly. So it's always some hard time to lose a job, but Bob might recover quickly. On the human side, there's nothing on this slide that says that Bob produces more than Susie or vice versa.
Mhm.
Both seem to produce the same. Yeah, there is some note here about deadlines, but it's hard not to have life demands
Mhm.
if you have a family. And so and that's it.
Okay. Great answer, Fernando.
Yeah, it's also a bigger saving if the major reason is about saving money.
Right? You can't beat that.
Yeah.
I will
Well,
say the one thing that, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna look for somebody, but so go ahead and say what you're saying.
Actually, just for the sake of the exercise, honestly, I I'll go with Susie for some of the reasons that others have cited. Above all, she's like having three kids and you know being loved by the employer. Um, and actually give her a raise. That's another thing. If Bob is no longer there, that's my thinking. It's
Mhm.
really perhaps biased, um, but he has a lot more experience under his belt. Perhaps give her a raise, having three kids and earning 55. I mean, that's like pennies. It's
Mhm.
it's actually just painful to see that. Um, so those are my thoughts.
Excellent. I love that answer, Mari. All right, so let's go to Natalie.
So I would probably also pick Susie because looking for two reasons and maybe more. First, looking at how she manages to have three kids and also be good at her job at the same time shows that she's talented and she has potential. Second, she seems to be someone capable of growth. We know that she's eager to learn new systems, and I like people who grow. I don't want people to stay forever in the same role. I would rather people keep growing into higher positions and the role becomes available for someone who would earn less but also capable of growth. So I really like when people do not become too stale in the role. And Bob, I'm not very concerned about him finding a different job, but staying for 20 years in the same role makes me sad even just thinking about this fact.
I love that. You know what? The next slide is going to be so much fun. All right. Brett, did you go?
I did not.
Okay.
Very similar to Natalie, not surprising. I know we think alike in many of these things, and a
We
lot of the
do.
same reasons that you mentioned, Natalie, I would agree with in favor of Susie. Because honestly, from my perspective, Bob kind of needs a nudge. You've been doing the same thing for 20 years. You're not growing, you're stagnating. It's really not good for Bob actually to continue in this position. And if there's other places that are interested in him or and willing to give him a even better opportunity potential, that's probably a better choice for Bob. So, and again, these are always not easy decisions, but honestly, yes, Susie obviously has a lot of potential and can continue to evolve and potentially be adding more value to the company. Bob is kind of maxed out. You've gotten what you're going to get out of Bob. He's not going to continue to grow. And like I said, I think honestly he needs the nudge. So
Awesome. Thanks, Brett. That was perfect.
no
All
problem.
right. Ken, are you at a point where you can answer now?
Oh, so I don't have to leave?
What's that?
It's probably Christine joining from two devices and listening to herself, right, Christine?
Yep, apologies. I'm swapping out. I'm going remote again.
Oh, no worries. Now, do you have time to answer your response, Christine?
Sure. So, I mean, at first, if I was going to pick between Susie and Bob, I think I'd go with Susie, because she is eager to learn. And Bob does seem to have like a better support system, but he seems like he might be a little lax on his heel, although he has expertise, right? It doesn't seem like he's a go-getter. And so trying to keep the position moving, I'd want someone that can actually do new things and learn. As far as earlier, you guys had asked a question about looking for position like a work. I'm a product manager of e-commerce and digital. And so I am in that realm, and if there are any opportunities that you can think of to send my way, I would appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine. All right. And then Ken, I don't think we've gotten you yet. Did Ken drop off? No, you.
Ken provided
Oh yeah, he's got stuff in the chat. Yep.
a
All right.
message.
And then now I'm trying to think. Now did we hear from Dave?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Dave, would you like to
Yes.
share?
Yes.
Yep. Would you like to share your opinion?
I'm sorry, I missed some of that. Can you just give me a brief synopsis? I have something going on in the background.
Oh, no problem. All right.
I
Are you able to
apologize.
see the screen, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what's happened is that the business that you're running, you have two people in like client services and a few people over in the factory, but we're focused on like this client services role. And there's Bob and Susie. And as you can see, like if you can see the screen, Bob's been there a long time, makes more money. He's been there 20 years. He's liked, he's dependable, he gets job offers regularly, right? Susie's single mother of three. She's much younger, makes less money. She's only been there 5 years. There are times where life gets in the way of her ability to kind of meet deadlines. Her work is consistent. She makes good on that. Her clients love her, and she's eager to learn new systems, right? But she's very focused on motherhood, and her life keeps her very busy that way. So you just have to decide which one you're going to keep because you can't keep both.
So what we decide which one we're going to keep
And then explain
and
why.
what
Yeah.
and why.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not like what we decide as a group together, Dave. What are you leaning towards?
Right. If you had to make this call, what would be your call?
I guess, I'm a big believer, I guess, in the best person for the job. So I guess whoever the best person for the job is in terms of getting the work done, that's who I would always go with.
So based on what I said, do you have a instinct or feeling as to who that would be? There's no right or wrong answer. So don't worry. There's not gonna be like,
Yeah,
ah,
no,
you're
I,
wrong.
I
Yeah, yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Let me see here. So well liked by clients and colleagues. Clients love her. I mean, it's hard to tell from this who would be the better person. I guess I would, for me personally, I would have to, really go through an interview
Okay.
process to understand. But you know, I believe in hiring the best person. Everybody has life problems. Like
Mhm.
I get that. But it would be, I can't hire and fire people based on their, if they have issues like outside. I mean, people
Yep.
make their choices. That's the way I see it. You make your choices and you got to live with whatever it is. So, but I would have to like interview both people and see, regardless of family problems, like what they're going to offer to the organization and, how good they are basically.
Okay.
So I
And
could
and
only
that
do that. I
yeah.
could only do that through interviews.
Yep, and that's fair, Dave. I actually had a couple people once that couldn't make a decision in the same way, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, right? Like, fair perspective. I purposely built these lists to make it so that you could easily justify either one. So the point was that, yeah, if you look at the lists fairly, right, there isn't one who is better than the other. And what you're hearing a lot of people bring up are extra things that kind of add a layer, right? But to your point, like if there's other things you'd need to see or hear or that you'd know from knowing them, that's more than a fair answer. So having said that now, there's one person left. So I think, oh, I guess we haven't talked to Sheila and we haven't talked to N Pilghouse.
I guess I'd add this one thing.
Sure.
I missed this part. I was looking for certain things, and I missed this part. So I definitely would want the interviews to make a final thing, but I would be leaning towards Bob, and it's because it says 20 years never missed a deadline, 5 years occasionally misses a deadline. So with that, I'm leaning towards Bob
Okay.
because again, these issues on the right are I don't see that as a work problem. Honestly, it's to me it's there were choices that were made. And
Hmm.
so I would have to lean towards Bob, but you can always go with the interview to, make like a final assessment.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. All right. And is it Pilghouse or Sheila? Do you have an opinion on this?
Hey Tim, I'm back.
Oh, hey Ken. Yeah, did you want to pop in with something? Because I think if we've heard from everybody who is willing to talk, I think we can move on. So if you want to
Yep.
kind of put in your 2 cents, I know you put some stuff in chat, but
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's, I usually try to find some sort of alternative if I can have them both work part-time if they're interested or kind of solicit from them. But on the flip side, if it's a hard decision, make one or the other right now, I'm not allowed to talk to them, not allowed to work it out. I'd probably go with Susie. It sounds, and then I would try to make sure Bob got some good introductions to, and the reasons why I have to do with equity and inclusion has to do with the fact that she's a single mother, and also that there's less cost, right? She doesn't have the external support system. Um, they're both no judgment on either side, just trying to pick the one that I think hopefully, can make the most difference. And again, the additional money that saved could also mean saving other people's jobs in the future. So, yeah. So I'm trying to take a holistic viewpoint of,
yep.
yep.
And again, so that's why the thing I want everyone to just really understand of the exercise. It's really to get those nuances of what's driving your decision. And so just to
Mhm.
quick give you some examples, right? I did this with a group of what do you call it, educational doctorates who were going in their last round before they were going out to be like principals and superintendents. And every one of them, it was flat out Susie because she needs it. Right. So the justification was entirely humanity based. It was they didn't care, right? It was it was completely on the humanity side, on the people side, right? And then I was at a small boutique agency and it was a chaotic, crazy, no rules, just like extreme project management method without rules, right? So they all went with Bob because they couldn't handle missing a deadline, right? Because they had no structure, they didn't have contingency, they weren't planning, right? So just the idea that somebody once missed a deadline meant like, you know what, they got to go, right? So what this is intended to do is really get people to think about all the different things that are driving your decisions and why. And what was really good about everybody's answers, right, is that a lot of people were thinking on both sides, right? So, like, okay, what are the economic conditions? Okay, what are the humane conditions? What does this insinuate about their work performance? What does this insinuate about what I'm going to have to deal with, right? Because I had said to the group at the agency when they all voted for Bob, I'm like, well, I actually think keeping Susie makes sense because she makes less. You can afford to give her a raise and still save money, right? She would have a harder time finding another job. Bob can easily find another job, right? So from an economic, like least damage, most wealth gained for the most people, like getting Bob into another company or giving him the opportunity to move into something else and having Susie stay on is the most advantageous for the entire system, right? So I was looking at it at a holistic, like macroeconomic level, and saying that that was the one that kind of made sense. So, but then the team called me on it because they're like, "You're the biggest delegator ever. You wouldn't want to have to dealing with a client if she missed a deadline,
Oh, I love
right?"
that they called you out on that. That's awesome. That's funny.
So again, we can all be very, very, very altruistic when we're talking in theory, right? And then how would we actually behave in the real world? But the idea was to get the concept between there are people that lean high people and people that lean high idea. And in the past, like those two teams, one was just high idea. I can't stand the idea of a missed deadline. And the other people were like, but she needs it. Right. So there's people on the edge. And what was good is that like I felt like everybody struggled with like it wasn't an easy choice other than the ones that saw the larger fit of okay. And even keying on words like I intentionally put like loved versus appreciated, right? Because that is a big cultural difference, right? Like, are you trying to just get things done and get things off your plate, or do you want people to be in love with your company and in love with your employees, right? So from that standpoint, that actually makes me that helps me know that I don't have to go as deep on a lot of these concepts because pretty much most of the team is already kind of thinking across dimensions and across pieces. So now we'll just kind of move into defining what these things are, right? And so I think what we've talked about before, right, is that like agile project management, all these things, like what we're going to be addressing is misalignment, overused strengths, and these unbalanced tensions, right? And I've got these four icons here that I use, and you'll see them quite a bit regularly. We'll get more into details on what they are, right? But this is what I would say your stereotypical project manager looks like from a quadrant balance with the quadrants that I've got. So like my face on the airplane there, that's the vision quadrant. My wife on a sailboat in the coral is culture. And then execution is our good guy Jordan. And then my brother-in-law, Eric, he's the structure guy, right? So if you think of a stereotypical, like what people think of as a project manager, high structure, then execution, some vision, but not necessarily concerned with culture. And again, that's a stereotype. I'm not saying that's how all of you operate, right? But I'm saying that that's how people kind of perceive us as a whole. And I think as most of you have seen in the world, right? More process does not equal more agility, right? So oftentimes when you get somebody who's high in an area like structure, they want to add more structure when things are broken. But what may be needed is to work on the areas that are weaker, right? Because you can keep stacking more into the big bucket, but if you don't fix the smaller buckets, things aren't going to move the right direction. So I've put people versus idea as one axis and process versus action as another axis, right? So in the example that we had, that really tested the people versus idea concept, right? Like, are you purely looking at this from a number standpoint? Are you purely looking at this from a, you know, numeric business impact? Are you looking at this from how it impacts people, right? So that type of tension between those two sides of the axis, define that. And then going left to right, we've got the process versus action axis, right? So do you want to make sure that you've got everything documented? Do you want to make sure that it's repeatable? Do you want to make sure that everybody's got complete alignment on where they're going? Or are you just the type of person who wants to get things done? And I think you guys have probably all met people across all of these categories, right? So people that are high in the process and people, that's kind of like your cultivation, your garden, right? Like, oh, I'm going to grow these people. I'm going to make them into beautiful human beings, right? Whereas you've got like your bridge builder engineer down in the process and idea piece, right? But you can put all the process and idea work that you want, but if you build the bridge where nobody needs it, right? That's you've just wasted a lot of money. And then over on the action side, and this is probably where I think the people that stress out the project managers the most happen to be, right? Like this is typically executive salespeople, marketers, right? So you've got the sparkler or spark plug. So that person wants to move, but their movement is about how things fit in to people versus the person whose action idea is just like, I've got something I need to do and I'm just going to do it. And they go. And they're not worried about the guardrails. They're not worried about the implications, right? And so that's why I've kind of got them represented as a tornado. And if you think of like entrepreneurs, that's where you can kind of see the difference, right? There's a person who's like, oh, I want to build this. It's going to be so cool. And I'm going to create it. And they don't know whether or not there's demand, right? So that's the difference between the tornado and the sparkler, right? Is that the sparkler is moving without thinking, but they're focused on what the need is, what the demand is, what people are looking for, but they may not actually know how to do it because they don't have an idea, right? So before I move on any further, is there anybody that has a question about that?
Yeah, could you go over that upper left quadrant again? I can't make out what the significance of the sketch is.
Oh, yeah. So that's a packet of seeds and seeds being put into the ground.
Ah,
So from a metaphorical standpoint, like the people process people are like your cultivators, your gardeners, right? So if you think of a company that's so focused on culture, right? I actually had a client like that. They were all culture, 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 culture. but nobody's doing anything, right? And they didn't know what they sold and they didn't know why people would want to use them, but they were really big on like, yeah, we're a great place to work and people love working here, but like some people were working 2 hours a day and complaining if they were asked to do a second thing that day, right? So what I'm hinting in there, right? Because what the next piece gets into is that the fact that there's companies that live in one quadrant, there's people that live in one quadrant, right? So anytime you've got a team or a business or you're interacting with another business, there's going to be these tensions because people are going to pull from the area that they're at, right? And you're going to both be pulling from it. I think Ken, before everybody got on, we were talking about this, right? Is that all these people come into this room with this different perspective and this different bias and how they want to get this done. And the reality is nobody's right, nobody's wrong, right? What it comes down to is you have to figure out how to get people from their bias quadrant into the middle and how to get everybody to understand like what can be done and what doesn't work. Did that help?
Yes, thank you. That was very complete.
Okay. All right. So again, just to get into the two axes really quick, right? Too many ideas can be chaos. Too much people work can be stagnation, right? So, the company that was all focused on culture wasn't growing. And there's a reason, right? Because you're spending more time tending your garden and going out and making sure people actually want your vegetables. Process versus action, right? So too much process, you get logged down in bureaucracy, and too much action ends up with thrash, right? So just like with many forces in the world, right? Equilibrium is where things mesh, where things get aligned, right? And if you think of agility, right? If this is a four, like a square of four corners, like if you're standing on a board and there's a ball under the board and you're trying to balance the board, you've got to keep all four corners level if you're not going to tip over. So in the same way, if you're trying to navigate making a business or project or program successful, right? The more you can work to keep it balanced and keep those tensions and those pulls together, the better off your project will be. So here's where we kind of get into how these create a system. And so as was mentioned in the introduction, right? Like you'll see here, we went back and those are the from that map that I had. You've got your culture quadrant, your structure quadrant, your vision quadrant, and your execution quadrant, right? And so those line up with exactly right. So you've got culture as the gardener, structure is the bridge builder, the sparkler or spark plug is your vision, right? And then the tornado is your execution. And any one of those left on their own can drive you off a cliff, right? So it's how you pull them together, how you keep them balanced, right? So these tensions will create patterns. And if the patterns aren't corrected, that creates drift. And the further you allow the drift to go, the more likely you are to experience failure. So there we go. There's our map of the four areas. So they're four forces, they're one system, and it's always in motion, right? Because I'm sure you can think of at times when you've been running a project or running a program that all of a sudden something shifts and what felt good now feels like this. And we were going this direction, or like a new person comes in, or something gets brought up that's going to throw everything off. And so when you think about it, within that larger system, and again, that system can define anything from marketing to delivery to operations to sales, right? Every function has parts of it that live within that system, right? So when we're talking about Agile and we're talking about product and program and project delivery, right? Your vision is your prioritization or why, right? Because I've always found that the good project managers don't just know the tasks that need to get done, right? They understand why they're doing it. They understand the outcomes. They understand the purposes, right? They understand what's trying to be accomplished. The structure is really, that's the roles, that's the governance. I've seen businesses that say that they're safe, right? But they're not doing three of the four things that are required to actually be running a proper scrum. right? And they're saying that they're Scrum, right? So not culture, structure is significant because if you don't have it, then you can't rely on the things that are there to do certain jobs, right? Now culture, right? That's like your safety and your feedback. So you can have all the right meetings, you can know what you're trying to accomplish, but if the team doesn't feel safe bringing up issues, if the team can't feel safe giving feedback to other people, right? Or giving honest feedback about their situation, your project's not going to succeed, right? So even within project management, culture is still a critical piece. And if a project manager is not creating the right culture, their project is less likely to be successful. And then on the execution, right? Like if you set everything else up, but then you don't do anything, you're not winning either, right? So at the end of the day, all four parts of this quadrant system are required and are important, right? Which then leads into what happens when one starts to take over. So if you're in a vision dominant system, right, there's going to tend to be a lot of chaos, right? Because it's focused about what we can do, what's next. Oh, in order to achieve this, maybe we need to do this instead. Like, oh, well, I just saw a movie about this, and I think that this would be the way that we should do this, right? So I'm sure we've all seen that vision dominant situation or person and the beautiful chaos that they bring into the environment, right? In a structured dominant situation, right, you can end up with too much rigidity. So the whole point of Agile was to make sure that you could pivot and respond and deal with the fact that the world changes, right? Because like many of you, right, I was managing projects in the 90s before the manifesto, and projects took at least 12 months and stuff changed. Things happened. New technologies came out, new things happened, like, or you found out like in month 8 that a decision somebody made in month 1 was completely wrong and the entire data model was wrong, right? And there was numerous projects, right? Where well, we can't go back. Well, we can't make that change, right? We've already sunk all this bad money, so we just have to keep throwing in more money after it. So rigidity is not a good side effect when you're allowing structure to dominate the conversation and that's the environment. And then with the culture dominant, right? Then you're more worried about feelings over outcomes, right? So you're more worried about whether or not people are going to get hurt, right? So it's that's not necessarily effective for getting to outcomes. It's an important thing, right? Because it's your team is going to work better if you have a good culture, but if you're too focused on culture, you're not getting things done. And then on the execution dominant side, if you're just running really fast, but you don't have any of these other pieces, you get burnout because things are being done twice. People don't understand why they're doing it. There's really not a lot of enjoyment in it. The culture is not fun, right? So execution dominant tends to lead to burnout. All right. So before we move into the leadership behaviors, does anybody have any questions or any comments about that balance between these quadrants or anything where they've seen where they want to kind of share where they've kind of seen firsthand that imbalance have a negative impact?
I think this is an amazing slide. A lot of this I've seen. The first one, vision dominant in startups. The second one in enterprises. Culture dominant, obviously, in smaller teams. Execution dominant. So everything is so familiar, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. It's definitely a shared experience I think most of us have had.
What's coming to me right now is the how like the structure dominant can also be tied to like the organizational structure and how if that's not designed around what the customer needs are, then you start to have a lot of handoffs and you start to kill your execution as well. So, yep.
Yep. Well, and I think another example of that too, right, is that like these people that build so much structure that their clients or customer, like the person who's getting what you're delivering, right? Because you don't deliver a project for no reason. If you put too many constraints on that person, they don't get what they want, they're not happy, right? So it's, yeah. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Yes, working in warehouse operation, I also see like a lot of structure dominant environments. Like, for example, when SOPs are airtight, but nobody like question whether the SOP is the right one or not. So that's it. I say that, and that's when, like, for example, working also like adopting AI. That's when I see like a lot of projects also stalls just because of this.
Yep. And what's funny about, so what I was saying earlier, Yvonne, right? Like, and then what happens in a structure dominant environment when something goes wrong, what's the first thing people do? We need another process. We need
Yeah,
to
we need another
document it, right?
process. Yes, yes, exactly.
It's like, no, you don't. That's not the answer. All right, so we're gonna switch tracks a little bit. It does relate. It'll come back, but it's gonna feel like I've made a left turn here. So just to warn everybody. There we go. So one of the concepts that we talked about in the intro is the Lominger competencies. Um, and I've got the book listed at the end of the conversation, but this book is a great book if you're interested in being a leader or working in leadership. So if you kind of look through this list of things, and I'll read it out because I know some people are on the phone, but if you go through, what I took out of it is some of the things that I think are people would say a really great project manager has all these things, right? So they scope projects and tasks accurately. They set objectives and goals. They anticipate and adjust the plan. They measure and track performance. They provide information people need. They're timely with the information. They avoid unnecessary details. They're attentive and active listeners. They have patience to hear people out. They're full of energy for challenges. They're flexible and adaptable in pressure. They marshal resources to complete. They're effective users of resources. They're skilled multitaskers. They're dedicated to highest quality. They exceed client expectations, right? Creating that love that we heard about earlier. Continuous improvement cycles, right? Willing to re-engineer a process. They can settle differences quietly. They encourage debate and can move on. They can handle risk and uncertainty, and they can find common ground easily. So would anybody disagree or say that some of these things don't belong on what a good project manager would have? All right. I was assuming no, so that works out good. All right. So what's behind that is what I read out is those are literally fact-based behaviors that are observable that people can say yes, no about you or other people. So they did years of research to build this of what people observe in different people, and then they married those observations to the people that were very successful at leading, not just, like, hey, I'm a great leader, people love me, but also then had great results also, right? And then they also mapped that against the people who did not do well, where they had issues within their companies or their companies didn't do well. And then they were able to kind of categorize and group these into competencies. And so what I have listed here is 16 of the competencies. And what that list came from is it was the definition of skilled across these 16 categories. There's 64 in total. So typically you only focus on a core 16 that you want to kind of focus on because some of them are a little bit like adjacent. So there's no point in kind of like getting into nth level of detail on every one of them, right? But these competencies are then categorized. So there's then behaviors that define unskilled. And here's the big piece that makes this, to me, one of the greatest assets in the world is the concept of overused. And I'll give you a quick story to kind of explain why that is, right? So I grew up in Minnesota, and my bosses in Minnesota would always tell me on my performance reviews that I was bad at conflict management. You're not skilled at conflict management. So when I got to Mars in 2000, and we had to do this exercise, and then the way they do it, it's a whole big program, and it's managed by by another company, but Everybody gives everybody else 360-degree feedback, and you just check off the things that define that person, and you check off the things that are like, oh, I would definitely say that that person's this, right? So you get extra points for the things that would define you and the things that are definitely true about you. And then what that does is it maps to how much unskilled, overused, or skilled behaviors are you doing across the 16 competencies that they're doing. So, of course, the first thing I did when I got my report back is I went for conflict management. I'm like, oh, let's just see how good this is, right? I was already cynical. I'm like, oh, this thing is going to be stupid, right? And I go to conflict management and I look at my score and it goes like overused. Ah, so the reason why my Minnesota bosses always said I was unskilled is because they don't like conflict. So Minnesota as a state is typically not a conflict management culture. So any amount of dealing with things is going to be perceived as being overt, being aggressive, right? So advocating for yourself, advocating for decisions, moving things is considered bad. Now at Mars, what I got to see was that like, okay, great. So I'm not in the unskilled category, like 90% of the people that I used to live with, right? But I've moved to the East Coast where they're more in the middle, maybe a little bit on the right, right? And I'm even to the right of them. So in my new world where the people were a little bit more aggressive, more used to self-advocating, they're rating me as overused and saying like, dude, enough already, right? So that's what lies into this. And this kind of gets into that whole balance piece and how this kind of ties together with the quadrants, right? Is that what the book got into is that you're overusing conflict management because you're not using other skills. So there are other skills that you're not good at that you should be using instead. So for example, on here, negotiating. It says work on negotiating and influencing. Okay, find other ways to manage conflict other than direct conflict, right? Same thing with dealing with ambiguity, right? Like, okay, people that can't deal with it, freeze. People that over deal with it, love it and leave a wake of destruction behind them because nobody can follow them because they live in ambiguity and chaos, right? So those are just some examples, but the key is that these different categories all come with observable behaviors that you can document and measure, and then you can quickly do a self-assessment, or you can just quick read through and see what somebody else is doing, and then you get to the point where you start knowing like, oh, you know what, that looks like this, and you pull out the one that you know, and you're like, yeah, that's exactly the one. I knew that that's what's happening, and then it gives you remedies and things to look at as ways to kind of manage either the unskilled or overskilled piece of it. All right, so any quick questions on that Lominger competency piece before I move on?
Oh, one quick question from
Sure.
me. Dealing with paradox, what is in this?
Ah, yes. So that, for example, is I want you to save, you need to cut costs and grow. You need to really be edgy in your marketing, but stay compliant with all of our legal pieces, right? So it's where you're being given two very polar pieces that you have to kind of navigate between, right? I'm trying to think of like a really good example. Hold on. That's why I got the book. Uh, Trying to find a really good example.
And you have to be creative in actually reconciling these two opposite objectives.
Yeah. So if you think about it, like the examples I gave were kind of minor examples, but okay. So let's take a project management piece, right? I need you to get this done tomorrow, but it needs to be high quality, no bugs.
And go take some rest as
Right.
well.
So the reality is like I think as project managers, the reason why it's hard for me to come up with like an easy example is because that's almost all that's what you guys kind of deal with all day, right? Everybody wants stuff that's competing, that's bipolar. Um, yeah, I can send some of that out afterwards, like when I've got my head. I'm in presentation mode right now, so I'm not able to kind of like go back into that deep dive. But it's that idea that there are two things that you kind of feel in a normal scenario you can't please both parties. So figuring out how to navigate how I'm going to get both things done or how I manage the expectations, right?
Mhm.
Does that help?
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So this is a little bit, this is the slide on overused and unskilled, right? But what happens, right? And this is kind of what I think we are getting to earlier is that overused strengths can look like best practices, right? So somebody who's overusing planning and organizing and loving to write those SOPs, right, in their factory, they get this overdependence on structure. They are leaving out the human element. They're inflexible with change. They can't tolerate normal chaos. They have desire to do things one way. They're unwilling to change course. Too much information too often, unvalidated information too soon. So those bottom two come from the overused of timely communications, right? So if you're too over communicative, right, you lose impact because it's too much information or you're being too quick, right? Unskilled looks like resistance, right? Oh, they're not setting goals and objectives. They're not comfortable with structure. Oh, they create confusion. Oh, they're a poor delegator. Oh, they're demotivating. They're unable to anticipate. They hoard information. They're unclear, late, and unintentional. So unskilled behaviors tend to look more like somebody's almost intentionally trying to misbehave, right? And oftentimes overused strengths get treated as best practices or SOPs, right? And they both signal misalignment. So you have to be on the lookout for how those things get there. And here's some examples of some of those concepts in like what makes good agile if they're overly used, right? So you can over collaborate. You can be overly flexible. You can over communicate. You can over iterate. And again, the smaller pieces of text are actual direct phrases right out of the book. Like these are things that you could see and say like, oh, ding, 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 ding. You're going to fall into overused on that. Okay, that means we're doing this, right? So that's where the diagnosis piece comes in really handy because you're able to really just see where things are breaking and make sure you can focus on whether you need to pull back on something or whether you need to bolster something. And if this needs to be pulled back on, whether the things need to kind of be pulled in. And then here's the examples of the resistance, right? So avoidance, right, is somebody avoiding conflict or crisis. Or it could also be somebody who's perfectionist and risk averse, right? It could be somebody who just lets problems fester too long because they're not an action person or a problem solver. A lack of clarity, right? This could be because people assume they know what the client needs. They've got hubris, right? Or they're just pushing for solutions before analysis. Or it's an inaccurate understanding because they're not a good listener, right? And then there's over indexing on uncertainty, and then there's poor prioritization. So all of these things kind of like tie together to say like this is how you can identify when the necessary skills aren't happening, right? So are you being blindsided by client problems? Are you creating confusion? Like there's all these things that happen when you move out of that skilled middle ground, right? So what happens, and this is where the term drift kind of comes in, is that as you start pulling away from the center, right? Like you start tipping, and now the natural tendency is to kind of keep going in that direction. Everybody feels like that's where we're at, and like, oh, well, I'm living over here and I'm seeing the problems, so the problems must be here, right? So that's the difficulty that drift creates, right? Is it creates this illusion of there being one specific problem, right? So the overused strengths, right? So part of why I had been successful was because I made sure that people knew what I wanted and I made sure that people heard what I had to say, right? Obviously at the at the cost of being a little rude, right? And a little nasty. But it did make me successful. Like it got things done and I got a lot of things done, but I was creating this wake of like, oh, Tim's really smart, but right. So I've tried to spend the last 25 years trying to reduce the size of my butt. Right. So the fewer people that can say like, oh, but, right. So then that overuse creates imbalance, right? And then again, to go back to one of the first concepts there, right? That imbalance is now what's creating that drift. The project's now moving away from center. You're moving away from equilibrium. You're moving away from getting the benefits from the four pieces, right? That means that you need to shift to get that piece back into the game. And I think, and especially with when I listened to the answers, right, that we had to the icebreaker, you can tell everybody's kind of dealt with this, right? So you've got to balance the system. You have to align the quadrants. And then the inherent natural state of what makes agility good comes through when you're able to do that, right? Once you've got those four pieces working together, the team feels good. You know where you're going. You've got some structure in place and people are actually doing stuff. It's like, that's magic, right? Because agility is an adjective. It's not a noun, right? And ever since the Agile Manifesto, which was meant to kind of cover a lot of different ways of being agile, there's been a tendency for people to want to productize agile and define it as a noun. And it's not, it's an adjective. And people need to remember that. And that's why, yes, there's different ways of doing it, Scrumban, Kanban, Scrum, right? But that recipe, that structure is only one part of it. So, all right. So then again, some of the things you just want to go through just to try and figure out where the drift is really start asking yourself, like, where's the tension? Where am I overusing? Like, where am I being too strong? Right? What's being overused? What are people avoiding? And again, we are just having this conversation last night because a business that I was talking to hadn't taken the time to figure out what its customers wanted. And they kept doing everything around that to fix their business. The only thing you can do now to get this to work is you have to go figure out what your customers want, right? So it's not just a project management piece, right? This is literally a leadership thing. It's an HR thing. It's a marketing thing, right? It's everything is about this. And I think we've kind of said this, but just kind of reiterate, right? Is that the goal is to fix the system, not to be spending all your time trying to fix the ceremonies, right? Because if you're confident that you're using the right set of standards for what you're trying to accomplish, right? You've defined your methodology that you're going to use. You've got this set in place. You're confident that this is the right fit. Figure out what's keeping things from happening within those buckets, not making sure that the buckets are there. Now, obviously, with execution, one of the things there is making sure people are actually following the structure. So I'm not saying that there's not an interdependency, but really you have to look at what's that driving factor underneath, right? So make sure that you're reducing the overuse, strengthen the underuse, and just restore balance. And so some things to kind of have in place, right, is just, a quick self-check of the quadrants. Okay, can I say we know where we're going? Does the team interact well? Do they feel well? Do they feel motivated? Do I have my structure in place? Is stuff getting done, right? Just a quick stop to just ask those questions, right? Can easily tell you where you're feeling the pain, right? It doesn't hurt to also kind of pick up some of those vibes from the team. What are the people on the team saying, right? Because maybe they have a different perspective on where that balance is at. And that's not unusual because just like with the Bob and Susie answer, no one's going to have the same answer. Everybody's coming at it from a different perspective, a different lived experience, a different set of expectations, a different set of things that they heard or understood out of this, right? Different cultural pieces. And then one of the tricks, and I've had to coach a couple of people on this, it's the non-defensive intervention script. I like to call it clarity day zero. If there's confusion, if there's things not making sense, if there's things that aren't happening, if there's things that need to be different, if there's things that need to be changed, get it taken care of as soon as possible, but position it in a way that you're looking for their confirmation, their advice, their alignment, their agreement. You're not telling them they're wrong, right? And then the earlier that you're doing that, you make sure that you keep from being on the defensive because 9 times out of 10, you know that something's going the wrong direction. If you wait for the other person to tell you it's bad, now everything that you've thought and everything that you're trying to fix is defense, right? And so the old line is like the best defense is a good offense. It's not an offense from the standpoint of like you trying to beat somebody over the head or you trying to win. But if you know that these things are going on, find the right way to present it in a way that you can get their alignment that, oh, I see this. You're right. This is an issue. Oh, you think that this is one of the things we should look at? Okay, well, here, start the dialogue, right? You use it as a way to introduce the dialogue to get people to share with you what they're thinking. And again, so okay, here's an example of paradox, Natalie. I just gave the advice, right? To just take the reins and make sure that you're the one pushing for that need for intervention, not waiting for someone to do it. But I'm also going to say one of the best tricks is to let the other person go first. Right? So I can't tell you how many times I've gotten into a conversation that I feel I need to tell this person X, Y, and Z. I go like, all right, why don't you tell me what's going on? And I find out that what the problem is and what they're upset about and what they're fighting about is something over here, A, B, and C. And A, B, and C are things I can agree with, and I totally am on board. And it's like, oh, great. Now we're here where we needed to be. And then we're actually then able to talk about X, Y, and Z just as a conversation, not as a fight. So that's that paradox, Natalie, right? Like what I'm getting at there is that you don't wait for the ball to roll you over to say like, hey, there's a problem. But it also, when you're having the conversation, you need to make sure that you're letting the other person speak first because you may find out something that changes the entire approach of how you want to handle the conversation or what's driving it.
What do
So,
you think? What types of skills or traits make someone really good at dealing with paradox? Because it's a non-trivial thing, right?
mhm. So here's the interesting thing. The intent of these competencies is to be trait agnostic. So I actually wrote a blog about this like last week. Your innate strengths, your innate things of what make you you shouldn't keep you from being able to balance these competencies. How you approach it and how you deal with it and how you manage it and how you make it happen is going to be different by who you are. So I want to be, and I'm only saying that because I want to be cautious because I know the traits that I employ or the people that I've seen that do this really well, the traits that they employ. So one of the things that I'm really bad at is being a listener, which is why I really enjoy doing things like this because I could talk for like 3 hours with and never stop to listen, right? So being a good listener is part of it because the more, but you've also got to be able to prod people and ask probing questions and get, because what seems like divergent polar issues aren't the more that they talk about what they're trying to accomplish. What's the outcome? What's the end goal? What's their need, right? I talk to this about in with agency delivery teams all the time. You're working so hard to make this happen, but what he needs to be successful within his company's culture is X. So he's giving you feedback about what's wrong when you're giving him things. But if you don't know why he's seeing that and why he's doing that, it's hard to tackle the problem because it's coming from what you see as being the wrong direction. Like, I can't do that. That's the wrong thing to do. Like, no, no, no. Right. But what's driving this? Oh, your issue is that like you'd rather hit a deadline and have the product come out bad than have a day deadline and have the product be right. Because in your culture, you're being scored on how many times you can check the box on time. You're not being scored on whether it was right. And in other companies, right, it's more like it's better to not fail and it's okay. I can give a day, I can give a week or whatever, right? So when the person's giving their input, like, no, 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 this can't, this can't, this can't, this can't. Well, what's the reason behind why you're giving me this feedback? What are you trying to avoid? Like, what's your fear? What's the thing that's driving your action? So from that standpoint, like people that are good at having those conversations with people and probing and reading people and getting people to really come out with like, like understanding those nuances, like they're really good at that, right? Because they're able to get to like what's going on. There's other people that are just better at like not taking it personal and absorbing it, and they can just manage it and get to hear, and they're able to figure out that this other group actually can wait, or that piece can be delayed, right? So that we'll fix this so that we can deal with this part, and then we'll hit that part tomorrow. So that's where I struggle with like a specific trait as much as I find that just recognizing that that's the issue and you need to deal with it. Right. Now the good news in the book, they'll have like 6 or 7 different possible remedies to get you thinking, because like, oh, this one might not work, but this one would. Right. All right. So push back on me on that one. Tell me whether or not like you're okay with that answer, or whether we need to go deeper with that.
So one possible answer, if we try to call things on a high level, is probably a trait of being growth-oriented person, right? It includes curiosity, ability, and willingness to listen, growth-oriented mindset, right?
Yep.
But I'm thinking what can be some other traits that can still come to the same positive result without one having this trait. One possible might be if you have a strong will to pretend, okay, I'm not really interested in what they have to say, but for the sake of success, I am able to pretend as if I am interested, right? It's a different one. I'm not growth oriented, but I am success oriented to the point that I'm willing to pretend. It does not humiliate me, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least 2 I've found. Any other ideas?
Yeah. Does anybody else have any thoughts on some of those types of traits at a high level, right? Like, because you're right. If a person doesn't have the ability to learn or listen, they're not going to be successful on anything. And then I think that those type of people can't even open this book because they don't want to read the negative, right? So,
but if they're so determined to be successful, they can still convince themselves, hey, I hate this book. I hate the mere idea of opening this book. But if this is the only way to success, I will do that.
gotcha. Any other thoughts on that?
Brett, I'm
Come on,
really,
Brett. You always agree with Natalie.
yeah, maybe not.
This
What do
time he
you
doesn't.
That's funny. No, I think the only thing I would add to this idea, and I think you alluded to it, Tim, which is this idea that we're all different and we all have kind of strengths and certain traits and weaknesses and others. And I think part of it's also like why that book and all of this information is really interesting is the fact that there's more than one way to solve the paradox issue. There's more than one way to solve a conflict. And I think until you let people see that and understand that, I think a lot of people will feel intimidated by those things versus feeling empowered because, hey, I don't solve it the same way that Natalie does or Ken does, but the way that I solve it still gets the outcome I want. It's just different and it works for me and I'm more comfortable with that. And then there's probably areas where you want to grow as a person where that stuff's hard for me, but hey, if I want to help the business and help myself, I need to probably think about those other areas and how I can improve and be able to be more, I think. Again, I don't think anyone would ever be perfect in all that. That isn't the goal, right? It's the goal is
Right.
using what you have to the best of your ability to drive the right things in whatever you're trying to do, the business, relationships, whatever that may be. That's how I look at it all from a high
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. I mean, for example, Brett, right? Like I am always going to be naturally conflict loving and conflict desiring. But what this tells me is that when I live in that space, I'm creating more damage than good. And then there's no point because then I'm actually not winning. So if the point of a conflict is to win, I need to stay here in the middle because this is where you win. Right. So to your point, like for me, that's how I did it. Is it was this rationalization that like yeah, it feels good to win the argument, but it really sucks to lose the war.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're also this all gets at is kind of that emotional intelligence, self-awareness, which is so key to being the best version of yourself, right? It's like
Right.
you need to have that to understand where you're good, where you're bad. And I think even sometimes when you need to kind of let others be the one that facilitates, right? Like, hey, that's not I'm not the right person for this. I know that. I'm aware of that.
Right.
I need you, Tim, or Natalie, or Ken, or someone else that I know is very good. So I think that's the other side. It's self-awareness and also kind of aware. And that's honestly, I think good teams, you have some of those innate understandings of each other and who's strong here and who's weak there. And things tend to be, I think, more efficient and successful when you have that. Again, I think this even plays into having diverse teams and
Hmm.
having different opinions and all those things. Like you hire a bunch of people that are exactly the same as you and think the same way as you, you're not likely to be very successful. Like it doesn't work. And this is
Yep.
this is just another illustration of that, I would say.
Yeah. And to that point, right, where this fits into the diversity piece, I'm not saying you have to pull everybody into the middle. But if you're leading, which and this is a great segue because like I really want to make sure that we kind of hit this point. Um, I've said to all the PMs and all my PMOs, when you look at what makes a really good project manager or program manager, it's the same things that make a really good business owner or a really good CEO. It is a leadership role, but it is treated like it's a task or it's treated like it's just a function. It's treated like it's a checkbox, right? And so there's actually a visual later in the deck where I've got your like a canoe river guide, like right, like you're rowing a canoe and you've got the tornado and the spark plug and you've got the the bridge builder and the gardener all in the boat with you, right? You're not trying to change them because your QA people probably live over in the bridge area. I don't know you're ever going to make a QA person into a marketer, right? So it's not about changing people. And to your point, Brett and Natalie, it's not about changing yourself, right? I'm fixing my problem with conflict by rationalizing and seeing the output. Other people with other strengths could do that. And actually, I think Mari and Ken have their hands up. So I'm going to stop talking for a second and prove that I can be a listener. Mari?
Are you go ahead? Yep.
Oh, Ken, go ahead.
Mari, you go ahead. Yep.
Can I go?
Yes,
Yep.
Mari, please go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. Yeah, thank you. What I wanted to add, along with that, having that kind of a conversation, holding the space for each other, is also having the psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
Because along with the psychological safety, then you have the ease to know that you're not going to get repercussion by listening and therefore holding the space for your counterpart. So because you're looking for alignment, for common understanding, henceforward easing the tension.
Yep. Now, so here's a question for you, Mari, before we go to Ken. Do you believe that even in a company that has a bad culture, where those repercussions do exist because it is a backbiting, nasty place, do you believe that you can create that space within your project team?
I think you can. However, I I think having the coaching skills goes a long way. Having the coaching skills, asking the right questions, holding the space, remaining neutral, and not holding, being detached, not holding your own agenda. So truly holding the space for the team. And yeah, so I think that
can help the team.
Excellent. Ken, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking about like being able to sit in some discomfort with all of that too. I mean, you're going to have people that you're working with that have completely different opinions and points of view, and sometimes it takes a little bit of patience to sit there and listen to and try to glean and get the nuggets from them that you need in order to create a good balanced situation for yourself, and then balancing your needs and their needs, right? How do you maintain that middle position? Because there are forces that are going to pull you off balance, right?
Yep.
I think Mary makes a good point about holding space for folks, and also it's got to be balanced with execution and leadership and all that too. It's all of the above. So we say in improv, it's yes and.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And the other last thing I would just add on, because like Brett, you brought up emotional intelligence, and I think one of the things that I coach on is that emotional intelligence has 5 pieces to it, and self-awareness is the entry level piece, right? So knowing yourself and knowing your issues is the first step, right? But then the next part within the category of self is self-regulation. And that's really to me, and that's the point of I think what this book is about, right? Is knowing I have this, how do I manage my behaviors? I'm not changing who I am. I'm always going to be an ass. Okay. How do I change my behaviors so that I'm not perceived as big of a butt? Right. So that's what the self-regulation piece comes into, right? And then the other thing, like even when I was much lower in the emotional intelligence quotient, I had a pretty strong others awareness. I could read other people's sadness, happiness, and feelings, but I didn't care. And that's what the next piece is, right? Like the next piece over is relationship management, right? So self-awareness, people awareness, self-regulation, relationship management. So what are you doing to build those relationships? What are you doing to bolster the people around you? What are you doing to make sure that there's a positive flow between everything that's going on, right? And then when the 4 of those are well structured, that's where the 5th one on top becomes executive presence. And they don't mean like giving gifts to executives, right? It's that whole like, am I presenting myself? And no, there's not, Maggie. I didn't think about that because I didn't know that that was the direction we were going to go. But I've got a lot of stuff I can send on that. If you get into the actual like emotional intelligence literature that's out there, um, there's a lot to it because I've got one person I work with right now who is very self-aware, but they're not managing the other pieces, right? So they don't see that they need to regulate it. They don't get, so for example, if there's an issue, they come to the meeting with a script of like, well, I've laid out what my feelings are and how this affects me and what I need to have changed, but they don't leave room in the conversation to find out what the other person's thinking or what their motivation was or what they thought. Right. So they're going off the assumption that they've been slighted. And it's like, well, no, that was actually just a situation that you misread. But you never get to have that conversation first because it started with like, well, I'm aware of my feelings and I'm aware of what I want and I'm aware of what I need. I'm like, so what? That's not actually what we're talking about
It's
here, right? So,
very, very teenager-like, right?
right, yeah. So that's where I would suggest going in and just finding, I mean, there's a gajillion articles on emotional intelligence, and the ones that make sure to cover the 4 bottom squares and then talk about executive presence on the top, because I've met a lot of executives and business owners that don't have executive presence, right? They still think it's all about them. They still get that, right? And that's why when I keep saying that like project management is a leadership function, it's a lot of what was being talked about, right? So like Mari, you brought up like it's about the team and staying neutral and trying to get good outcomes and making sure that everybody can get what they want and that you're meeting people where like all of that is what leadership is, right? It's not trying to change the individuals, it's trying to align the team towards a common outcome. It's being the one saying like my ego isn't what matters. What matters is that the team wins, and how we get there together is way more important than doing it my way. And that's really, really, really a hard skill for a lot of people to get. And Natalie, one of the things that you said, I'm going to go back on really quick, because one of the things I've been trying to be really careful with people is to let them know that, like, strategy is having more curiosity than knowledge. There's no good strategy that comes out of saying, like, oh, I know this, because then you end up in like Yvonne's world, right? Where it's like, oh, well, this is everything we know, and this is how we do this, and blah, 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 blah. Like, that's not strategic. That's documentation of your knowledge today, right?
I'm
So,
just
yeah, go ahead.
throughout all these conversations, I keep thinking that some people can learn these things and can become better, but some people, just by nature, they have intuition that helps them figure out all these things without scientifically analyzing them, right? Aren't they lucky?
Yeah, those people are very lucky. Although I I believe so. If I look at a lot of the prep schools and a lot of the high end universities, I know that they actually kind of get into some of this stuff. So I do believe that some of the people that look like they're naturally aware of these things, I don't know if they're being overtly taught it, but I think it's being subtly introduced through how they work through things, right? If you think of like some of these wealthy families put their kids in these programs where they go and they do these things. It's because it's giving them an opportunity to see that diversity, to understand what it's like to have to make a decision and to have to live with it and to have to evaluate whether that makes sense or not, right? So, like, so many people aren't raised understanding those nuances, and so I struggle with that nature versus nurture piece, right? I believe that I want to believe that everybody can get there. I just think, to your point, most people don't want to. Like, if something comes and hits them aside the head, I think anyone's capable of actually learning these things. I just think most people are shut off to it.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
I think that's part of it as well. Remaining curious to discovering why not?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yep.
just further asking the individual or the individuals, why don't you? You know what I mean? I mean, like in some kind of a question like that, because yes, remaining open again, being open and listening to what he or she has to say or what they have to say goes a long way.
Oh yeah. And when it's not working, it's so obvious, right? Like, we had a project manager who was mad at me because I wasn't letting him release the product, and he was mad because there was only 2 bugs. He's like, we can't hold up a product over 2 bugs. But in every meeting that the project manager had with the QC people, they're explaining to him, we have been unable to run any of our 365 test scripts because the 2 bugs are, when I hit the start button, nothing happens. When I click the load a file button, nothing happens. So he's focused on the number 2 and not listening to the fact that that's keeping them from doing their testing. And he actually escalated all the way to the president. So I got pulled into the president's office, and he's like, I hear you're holding up this project like over 2 bugs. Why? And when I explained what the 2 bugs were and the impact were, he walked right out of his office and he fired the lead of the project and the project manager, because he's like, that is just ridiculous behavior, right? Like, that's just not listening. If you're not going to take 5 seconds to hear what 2 bugs means, right?
But
So,
you're exaggerating, right? It's not
no,
a real
that's a real
situation.
story.
That's a real one.
Wait, Tim, how did you get called into the office?
He happened to be visiting
Who
that day, and I
called you? The
walked by.
project manager?
I was the delivery lead for a client that was using this tool, and they were trying to move us onto a new tool, but they hadn't built it to work yet. So I'm like, we're not moving our client on there. Like, I'm looking out for my client, going like, there's no way I'm popping them onto something that doesn't work.
I had a story like that. I mean, this sort of thing just recurs all the time.
But nobody thought to ask what the 2 bugs were. So he was allowed to just share that one piece of data and not share the rest of it, which was that nothing was functioning. And that's how bad the culture was that
but
it went all the way from these people to the president. So I got called into the president's office. Like, how stupid.
may I ask what industry that was?
Yeah, so that was working at Hart Hanks, and
Uh,
it was an insurance company's affinity marketing database, but we had outsourced to like this group in India that was doing WePro. They were trying to build something new for us, and it didn't work at all.
Really?
Yeah.
I worked for WePro. They're pretty good.
They're good as long as they're being managed properly.
In the example that I had, I was told we had to deliver it. I was in a quality assurance role. And I said to I was relatively new to the company at the time. I said to the boss, what do I do? He said, you write an email to the project manager and say, list all the items. In your case, it was example was two. I had five. And get the project manager to acknowledge he read it. So I got the message back. He says, we got to deliver this because we got to get the progress point payment. If we don't deliver by the 15th, we don't get paid. The whole company disappears. And then we have to fire both Bob and Susie. Right. So,
Well, that's
so
a
I,
much easier decision, though.
so I sent him the email. He sent back. They delivered it. 5 days later, well, maybe it was actually 2 weeks later, the customer came back and said, you got 5 issues open. But we got the progress payment and we had to redo the work. A lot of this stuff, I don't know. It's not exactly agile. It's just kind of like different degrees of stupid.
Well, but it does fit into there, right? Which gets back to I think there's an element of vision and structure there, right? Which is one of the things I've always felt that like agencies, quote unquote, have a problem because they're typically out for their own gain and how to get the dollar versus trying to make sure that the client's successful. And the good agencies are not, right? The good ones actually get their role and they try and do that. But too many are just so focused on what they need next. And I think that gets to what you're talking about, which is if you don't set up the incentives properly, if the incentive is, oh, I release on time and I get paid, you are rewarding and enforcing a specific behavior. So now you're creating a culture that says it's okay to do
Yeah.
bad work as long as you do it on time. Right. So it does fit in, but that's where people don't think of how these executive decisions about how you structure that principle to agent alignment has a significant impact on how all of this stuff gets done.
Okay. Yes.
I would like to check how are we doing in terms of time. This is not the last slide, right?
No, but it's pretty close, right? So, and I hinted before, right? Like the project manager, like Mari said, is you are neutral. You're there to help deliver, right? Somebody's got a vision, right? Somebody's got a job to do. Somebody's responsible for making sure, like you build the framework, you create the culture that allows a team to success and let the team do it and help them to get there and then worry about dealing with the obstacles and the decisions and all these different things, right? But when you're balanced, right, that's when you can truly be agile, right? So like I've said before, like project management, agile, it's a leadership practice. Like I think project management is the least recognized leadership role. And it's the one that actually sets you up to be far more successful than a lot of other roles. And so, yeah, and now we're at the question slide. So I think we're doing okay because we had a significant amount of
Yes.
conversation
Mhm.
during the
Mhm.
discussion. So are there any like final pieces that anybody wants to bring up or any stories that kind of like has got them thinking?
I'm sure people have some other pieces to add because it's a very interesting conversation that we're having this evening. Ken, go, please.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, okay, so at one point what I did is I interviewed two or three dozen different Scrum Masters in a company. I won't mention the company name, but it was interesting to me, like the different ways of perceiving their role and perceiving their job and how it related to some of the things that Tim was talking about. Like In that particular company, I'd say about 75% of the Scrum Masters are focused strictly on that delivery piece and the project management piece. There was about 15% that were, starting to at least work with other people and helping them to grow and that sort of thing. And then there was the remaining like 10% that had a holistic view of what was going on, that was able to engage across the stakeholders and the teams and kind of bring it all together, given the, concepts and things that Tim was talking about, along with other things. And it was just such a marked tier to me in terms of the different perceptions and how effective each group was. Like that 10% could do anything within the company, you know. They're actually be able to do anything within that company, right? So the question is, for me, is what can we do with the 15% to bring them up to that 10%? And what can we do to the 75% to at least bring them up to the 15%? You know? And hopefully, yeah, this feels like a one of the good tools you can use to do that.
I'm also thinking about for the last several minutes when we're talking about traits and the ability to listen before you speak in a meeting setting, for example, right? You let other people speak so that they can unburden what's holding them. And then once they are ready to listen to you, that is when your time comes to speak, right? And it works quite well, I've seen. But why not everyone behaves like this? Do you think it has to do with confidence? The more confidence people have, the more they are able to keep quiet because they know that when they actually speak, people listen, right? And the less confident people are, the more they try to dominate every possible conversation and show that they are the type who knows that all. What do you think?
I so I'll respond first, right? That I think there is definitely something there. One of the things I learned in college, because I just went back to school 2 years ago because I had never gotten my degree before. And so I went back full time 2 years ago. I didn't know about the imposter syndrome, right? So I had no idea that there were that many people who had no clue or who were afraid that they had no clue, right? And so I think to your point, it tended to be that those bad behaviors that you're talking about, where the person is just like so arrogant and so like yada yada yada, and I'm the boss and they're in command and they don't allow for any dialogue or questioning. I think you're right. I think there's a significant amount of confidence in them knowing whether or not they can actually do it. Any other thoughts?
I think
Guys,
I think
yeah, go ahead. Feel free to chime
yeah,
in.
sorry, this is Maggie. It's interesting. Yeah, I think I've definitely experienced the phenomenon of, oh, I need to speak a lot to make it seem like I know what I'm talking about. And whereas people who are more confident may not feel that need, but also conversely with the imposter effect, I think people of good conscience experience, I would guess, experience the imposter syndrome more frequently because the more you know and the more you do, the more you realize what you don't know and what you
Exactly.
have not mastered.
This is another paradox, isn't it?
Yeah, a bit.
One of the
Or it's
paradoxes.
one, or I mean, I'm sure you could find, a smattering of people, with both on different levels, but yeah, that's just been my observation.
Well, and to the curiosity point earlier, right, is that there should always be way more that you don't know than you know. Because if you think you know more than you don't know, that means that your box is too small.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's a
Right.
big flipping
Right.
world, okay? Like there's a lot to learn.
Right.
Ivan, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, yes. I have a question for Tim. Like basically how you distinguish between someone who is like genuinely like unskilled versus someone that is just misaligned.
So that gets back, and I think was that was it Pretz? I think that talked about doing more interviewing. Oh no, was it Dave? But somebody was like, there need to be more prodding. The only way to really get into the meat of it is that that's where you have to be able to talk to the person. And what you're looking for there is, are they aware that they're unskilled? Can they see that they need to change? Because, and again, even if they're not there or not able to change it, are they aware that they're having this negative impact? Can they see beyond just what they have in front of their face? Right. So oftentimes it does require that conversation and getting them to tell you where they're at. And typically you'll be able to tell by, again, some of those overused skills that Nelly was just talking about. Like if they come out all bolsters and like, well, I'm right and I know this and I know that, and these people are all wrong and blah, blah, like that's just somebody who's unskilled and if they're really good at their job and they get the job done and you can manage the negative impact they have on the team, right? Then great. Um, if they're unskilled and they don't care, I I have a hard time with that, right? Like that's just it's just long term, that's just not going anywhere. Versus if it's just somebody who's not, if to me, if somebody's not aligned, it means that we haven't done a good job of making sure everybody knows why we're there. So that to me is far more like you have to make sure you're doing a good job of making sure everybody gets why we're there. Right. Whereas like the unskilled is okay, these are the behaviors this person's doing that has a negative impact on the team. And I need to figure out whether it's correctable, A, within the person, B, within the environment, or not at all, at which point then need to figure something out. Is that the direction you were headed with that, or did you have a
Yeah.
different? Okay.
No, yes, sir. I have to agree with you. So when you said about someone that is just misaligned, then that's on us, as leaders to actually like bring that person, on board. Sometimes, I mean, most is lack of communication, or sometimes we're not just very clear with our expectations, and that's why it causes this when team members are misaligned, not on their skills.
Yeah. I mean, so for example, right? Like I get a lot of founders and small business owners upset that their team doesn't do X, Y, and Z. And when you get into it, it's the owner's behaviors and the way that they're treating the people and the way that they're communicating and the way that they're sharing and the way that they're focusing and setting a vision that's determining these behaviors. Like these people are fully capable of behaving the way they want them to, but he's not actually creating that space.
Yes, sir. 100% with you there.
We may have time for one or two more comments. Who else
Anyone
has
else,
questions?
guys? Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, guys. Please do share. And what was the name of that book again? You got
Oh,
me
I'm sorry. I
interested,
actually have it
Tim.
on the next slide. Hold on.
Huh.
So there is another slide. Let me get there. I'm using my wife's desk, so I'm not used to her equipment. There we go.
That is the book, right? From Minnesota. Do you know the author?
I don't. And it's funny because like I didn't know about them until I moved out to Pennsylvania. So it was actually I was in Hackettstown, New Jersey when I found out they actually existed.
Can you kindly put it on in the chat, please?
Oh, sure.
Thank you so much.
Let me figure out how to do that. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I think we're good there.
Got it.
Yeah, you really got us interested with this book, right, guys?
Yeah. Oh, I got to get out of presentation mode.
I put it in there for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Maggie.
Tim, thank you so much for the presentation tonight. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. This has been awesome. Great conversation, very interactive. I've really enjoyed it.
Very interactive.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you're really skilled. You really overcame your initial conflict type of mindset, and you became such a brilliant conversationalist.
Thank you. And again, it's not easy because even in this conversation, me stopping and asking those questions, I have to tell myself to do that. I would go on, right?
Yeah. And also, just don't forget, everybody, our next meetup is with Amelia Breton Lake. She's going to talk about the joyful system, how play reveals the invisible forces shaping your work. Also promises to be a very interactive session. She's going to talk about the string game where you learn how to make invisible relationship systems visible, uncover hidden communication patterns, and discover how play creates the safety needed for real change. So here is the link for that in case you're interested.
And sorry for interrupting. People asked you, Tim, to share your LinkedIn profile so that we can follow
Oh, sure.
you. Yep.
Yep. Is there a way I can email the group after this, Ken?
I don't know about email. I'm not sure. I don't know if
Okay,
there
let
is
me
an easy way
I
to
should
do
be
it,
able
but
it's
I think we can. I think we can. But we
Through
have to go
Meetup?
through we have
Through
to go
Meetup?
through the I think we have to go through their interface, the Meetup's interface though, which is kind of
otherwise
hinky.
if I mean I can see if I can quick type it in. I am really bad at typing.
What are you
So
looking for? Your
yeah,
company
LinkedIn?
name?
My LinkedIn profile is just
I'll
Maybe
grab it
maybe
for you.
Ken
there's not
I'll
many
grab it
Tim
for you.
Biskups, so
Ken can do that.
I'll
yeah.
grab it. I got you.
Yeah.
Yours is easy. Your link is easy.
Well, and also like I'm one of those names that there's not a lot of people, right?
Yeah, there you go.
It's not a popular last name in the Czech Republic, and Tim is certainly not a popular name there. So
There you
Great,
go.
guys. And then earlier in the chat, guys, we also posted the link to our Slack workspace. Please join whoever is not yet a member there. And we exchange our job openings, and we often receive emails with job openings through recruiters we worked with before and other interesting types of information that we exchange, okay?
You'd be so kind as to repost that Slack link.
Yes. Arseny, can you do that again, please? And also the one to our LinkedIn group as well.
Yeah,
okay?
just
Thank you.
Yeah, and we are recording this, so we should get it probably up on YouTube, I'm guessing sometime in the next few days. So if that helps. Yep.
Yep. And also thank you guys for being so open and active in this conversation and responsive to Tim's presentation.
Yep. And yeah. Yes, here's the link. Oh, you got the Slack link? Yeah, here it is. Oh, that's the presentation link. Yes. Okay, great. You got the Slack link. Cool.
Mari.
Yes, did you say it is through the Slack channel where you share if there are openings like roles?
Yes, there is one of the channels there. Whenever you join the workspace itself, find that channel that is called Jobs and Job Seekers, I think, and join that channel. You should be able to, okay?
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Where is the link for the job stuff?
It's the link for the Slack channel in general. It is the link to the workspace itself. And once you are there, you will see the different channels that we have, okay?
Yeah, because I think I tried to log in and I think I had problems logging into it. I'm not exactly sure.
Can you guys maybe connect with Arseny through LinkedIn, and then you would be able to troubleshoot it through LinkedIn messaging between yourselves? How does that sound, guys?
yeah, sure. I can publish my profile.
Can you please? And then Dave, you can connect with Arseny to troubleshoot it, okay?
Okay.